Welcome back to our fifth I Am. We find ourselves in John chapter 11. I'm going to read verse 17 to 26. This is where Jesus is able to declare, I am the resurrection and the life. So in John chapter 11, verse 17 to 26, it reads like this. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. Many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. This is Jesus' friends. He would hang out with them, dine with them. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, oh, I know. He will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? See, once when Jesus was hanging out, went to a family dinner with them, he was hanging out with them, and Martha's working, doing a bunch of stuff, preparing the meal, cleaning the house. Somebody had to do the work, right? In the meantime, Lazarus and Mary are just kicking back at the feet of Jesus, just, hanging out with him, spending time with him, most importantly, listening and taking in the words of Jesus. Martha, trying to prove a point, was like, Jesus, can you just remind Mary that I need a little bit of work, a little bit of help here? How about we all just finish the chores and then we can just sit down and talk? And Jesus looks at Martha and is like, hey, Martha, Mary has, even though all those things are necessary, Mary has chosen what is better, what is good. Because that work, those chores, all the things you have to do will always be here, but I won't always be here. And she has chosen the better. Isn't this amazing that now that the brother has died, the one that's running out frantically saying, Jesus, where have you been? Two sisters both lost their brother. One of them is just, I don't know exactly her state emotionally, but at least she's at home. She's accepting reality. She's just, trusting in God's sovereign plan. And Martha's running out, just confronting, like Jesus hadn't even got to the house yet. She met him on the way. Jesus, if you only would have gotten here a little earlier, my brother wouldn't have died. And Jesus is like, Martha, he's going to rise again. And Martha's like, yeah, I know. I get it. I've heard your teachings. You've come out to our home. You've preached a couple of sermons. I've heard you out in the mount, and I've heard you share in the synagogue, but my brother died. You should have came earlier. I know one day he's going to resurrect. And Jesus is like, no, not just that resurrection, but I'm talking about right now. Because Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. And if you believe it, even though things are dead or he is dead, it shall live. And he simply asked her, do you believe this? The reason why it was hard for her and others around to believe this is because at least in the Jewish tradition, they believed that when some person died, even though they believed in the afterlife, they believed that at least the soul, the inner person, would still kind of be with the shell. In other words, with at least 3 days of being dead, a person that had just died, they at least had some time in hopes that there'd be a resurrection. That maybe, even though they'd clinically be declared dead, there'd still be a couple of days, a last hope of maybe the body with the spirit resurrecting. But now it had been the 4th day. You see, this is crazy because we think that Jesus got there too late. Like, isn't it amazing? We've seen God come through, whether it's physically being healed, or somebody going through some financial struggle and can't pay their rent or can't pay something off. Or, we've seen God's provision, like us financially struggling. All of a sudden we get a job. But isn't it amazing that it's never on our time? My brother and sister-in-law, who I adore, after 15 years of waiting for their own, like I was almost embarrassed to tell them every time I got pregnant with another child, even though kids are amazing and they're worthy enough to be celebrated. But my brother and sister-in-law, they couldn't have kids, and they were amazing. What hurt the most is that they're amazing uncles and aunts, and I just wish they could have their own kid. And after 15 years of waiting, against all hope, even they had given up. Somehow, some way, God gives them a miracle baby little girl, Mila, my niece. And I have other nieces and nephews, but I mean, she's automatically my favorite. Like, she's a miracle baby, right? But why is it that even though God's going to come through, like Jesus is on the way, he's making plans to come and visit his good friends, Martha and Mary. Why not just come sooner? Why are you getting there so late? And isn't it amazing that even though on our time he's late sometimes, he's never too early or too late, but God is always on time. In a Jewish custom, they thought that 3 days was good enough for some kind of miracle, last-minute miracle, but it was now the 4th day. And on their watch, it was too late. But Jesus had a divine intervention, and it was a great setting, a great opportunity for him to present himself as the resurrection and the life. And he asked Martha, "Do you believe?" And we know how the rest of the story goes, and he declares Lazarus come out and roll back the tomb, and Lazarus comes out, jump in, and he tells the disciples, untie him, and Lazarus is able to live a few more years. But guess what? Eventually Lazarus died. God did a temporal healing because his permanent healing and resurrection is what he says, that we will never die, that we will live forever. And Jesus is promising us not only life here on earth, but on that Saturday of Easter weekend that we just celebrated some time ago, on that Saturday, he's taken back authority of the resurrection, and he's taken back authority of eternal life. He conquered sin, he conquered the grave, and now he offers that to you and I. For all of eternity, we can live with God the Father. No pain, no suffering, no sin, no tears, none of that. No, everything will be perfect. Why? Because heaven is not heaven without Jesus Christ, and we'll get to have him, the resurrection and the life, forever. I pray that if you've grown tired, desperate, if you said, man, when is God going to come through for me? I pray that you don't grow weary, that you don't give up, that you keep on knocking on the door like that widow. Keep on crying out to Jesus, just trusting, believing, or just, trusting on his sovereign plan and believing in that resurrection power. That even though there's things that have been declared dead in your life, maybe it's a kid that's been in rebellion for years and ran away. Maybe it's like my brother and sister-in-law, hope and desire for a child, and you just kind of gave up on that. Let me tell you, got to go back to the story, that because of the faith of my brother and sister-in-law, my sister-in-law's sister in Mexico had been married over 20 years, 23 years, no kids. And them seeing the miracle that happened to my brother and sister-in-law activated their faith to begin to believe. And after waiting over 23 years, they just gave birth to twin boys. Imagine that. So maybe you've given up, and maybe you're like, oh, well, that's your brother. Well, hopefully testimonies like these can activate your faith And that you know that even though there's things dead in your life, maybe it's you lost hope. Maybe you quit school for whatever reason and you always wanted to graduate from this or that, or those dreams that have been dormant, those goals, those desires, most importantly, that calling that you know God has gifted you and has called you to do. Maybe you're like, man, somebody else can do it. Just like Martha, oh yeah, later on he'll resurrect for eternity. And Jesus is like, no, I'm not talking about the later on. I'm talking about the right now. And Jesus is telling you today, I am the resurrection and the life. And even though he who believes will live, and even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. And I close with this. Just like he asked Martha, do you believe? I pray that you challenge yourself to see that resurrection power in his life be manifested in your day today, in your life today and forevermore. God bless you.